All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our NFL Mock Draft 3.0, a three-round mock. We'll be doing these in about 10-pick increments, so if you'd like to skip around. We would like to go ahead and just preface that we really do not know what is going to happen in this draft. Things are all over the place. This is obviously as the dust is kind of settled on free agency. Obviously, rumors galore. This is kind of a mix of what we would do and what we think is going to happen. So, obviously, there's going to be varying opinions, but this is a wide-open draft if I've ever seen one. You start with the top five, Caleb Williams penciled in at 1. Drake May, I still think he's the option of his arm talent, having the higher upside with his, prototype size at number 2 for Washington. I think Patriots taking Marvin Harrison Jr. has got to be the option here and figure out quarterback later as they kind of have a bridge in place for the future. The Cardinals, Malik Neighbors, I think those would be some nice speed added to the rotation for Kyler Murray. And obviously, we don't do a lot of trades, Nick, but the Vikings, it seems they are incredibly adamant in moving up. And it seems like the Chargers will be the prime candidate to move back. And that's going to leave them with J.J. McCarthy, who they seem to be absolutely adamant about taking, a guy who has, a high upside of his arm talent and some of his intangibles. And obviously, this is a guy that a lot of people are going to be disrespecting due to, the nature of style he played for at Michigan, not having big statistical games. I think that's a little bit of nonsense because the talent is certainly there. But this is a guy who's going to have a lot of weight on his shoulders, especially with the Vikings are selling the farm here to move up.
Yeah, the NFL is a quarterback's league, and you need to have a quarterback successful in this league. So teams are going to gamble, roll the dice to try and get their quarterback. 3 quarterbacks going in the top 5 is sort of how it goes. When you have these talented quarterbacks, you need to try and go grab one immediately. I think Williams and May are the 1 and 1A easily. 1 and 2 definitely there. I think I've saw some smoke and mirrors about the Commanders. Potentially taking McCarthy at 2. That's what it is in my opinion. Smoke and mirrors. I think they're going to take May. I think May fits the mold, makes a lot of sense for them there. McCarthy, the Minnesota Vikings, makes a lot of sense to me. This is a team that really does need a quarterback now, and they're very uncertain. I think their team is not terrible. The rest of the roster, I think they do have some talented pieces across the board, and they could plug in a guy like McCarthy, and it could work early on successfully. I think this would make sense at 5. When you look at Harrison and Neighbors going 3 and 4, 2 very talented wide receivers. I think Harrison is the more talented of the bunch, but, you can make your case for either or. And when you look at the Cardinals, they're in a position, in my opinion, if you plug a guy like Neighbors in, to really be successful very quickly. This team has a lot of draft picks. We'll get into them. They make a ton of picks in these first 3 rounds, and they have a decent offensive line. They have a good quarterback who obviously battled injuries in Kyler Murray, but if you give him some weapons, it could certainly work out early on. If they get Malik Neighbors at 4, that could be the start of a really special draft there.
And you look at the next 5 picks, you have a run on, tackles. Joe Alt a booking for the Giants. I think taking a quarterback in round 1 for them would just be the wrong move after they kind of trapped themselves in that Daniel Jones contract. Alt a bookend tackle with some great strength, good in zone run as well with his lateral agility. Talise Fuaga was a standout right tackle for Oregon State last year. Top run blocker in college football. Aggressive player, very humble young man. I think the Titans would love to add him to continue their impressive offseason. Raheem Morris, he spent a couple of seasons with Aaron Donald and the Rams. I think he understands the importance of a guy on the interior who has a high motor with some great hands. I think Newton would be the ideal selection for them. And then you have Olu Fashanu at 10. Right in front of that, Rome Odunze. The Bears seem infatuated with him, a guy who can win downfield 50-50 jump balls, great hands, getting Caleb Williams, another weapon. And then the Jets, getting that Penn State tackle who's just a phenomenal pass blocker. That's something they really need to continue to work on. They did add Tyron Smith. He's going to be their left tackle, but that was just a 1-year deal, and I think this would be a nice opportunity to take a player they can mold into a future Pro Bowler. I think this is a nice little top 10, Nick. Obviously, there's no Jaden Daniels. We'll see him here shortly, but I think a lot of these teams like the Giants, the Falcons, and the Titans, they'd be incredibly happy, and even the Bears.
I think, a couple tackles here are really important, especially for the 2 New York teams. Giants taking a quarterback makes no sense. That offensive line was clearly the biggest issue with this team. The Giants defense wasn't that bad last year. Certainly in the tail end of the season, they got a lot better. The offense, there were a lot of woes there. You could make the case for quarterback. I'm not going to. I think that's a ludicrous argument here. I think bringing a guy like Joe Alt, a perfect addition to this offensive line that really had a ton of issues, although there are some players finally starting to figure it out there on the offensive line. You look at the Jets as well, another team that has big issues on the offensive line, regardless of who's going to play quarterback for them over the next couple of years. You plug in a guy like Fashanu, who is a really solid, strong offensive tackle from Penn State. I think that makes a lot of sense. The Bears, I personally would not have taken Caleb Williams first over. I would have traded down. I should have mentioned that earlier. But I do understand the decision here. You reset your clock on the contract. You move Fields on and get a pick for it. might as well. And now you bring in a talented player, Romo Dunze, to give your new star quarterback a weapon. The Bears are in a very great position. I think the NFC North is trending in a bit of a weaker direction with the Packers uncertainty. The Vikings certainly very uncertain. I know the Lions are a strong team, but the Bears have a great defense. We saw that last year. Their offense was getting better. The offensive line looked pretty good as well. Now you add in another talented weapon with a star quarterback under center. This could work out very well for the Bears.
And looking at the rest of this first half of the first round, Chargers trading back down and getting Brock Bowers. I think that would just be an A-plus night for them. Obviously, one of the greatest talents I've ever seen at the tight end position. Jaden Daniels coming off the board here at 12 for Denver. Seems like they want to get a quarterback as well. Probably not going to be as aggressive in moving up, though. Daniels, though, the Heisman winner, guy who's got great speed, a phenomenal runner. We'll want to see how he can continue to develop, though, now that he doesn't have those college scheme to kind of work in. We'll see how that works for him and Sean Payton. Byron Murphy with the Raiders, another team. You're not really sure what they're going to do. Seems like shoring up the defensive line, Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, and this big gap clogger, Byron Murphy, would just give them an elite, defensive front. Cooper DeJean to the Saints. It seems like a good player. Might skim down the board. Marshawn Lattimore, that may be looking to move on from him. And then Quinton Mitchell. We did do this mock before L'Jarius Sneed got traded to the Colts, so maybe corner is not on their list of needs. But, grabbing a rookie to pair up with him is really going to set them up well, I think, for the future. So I think it's certainly on the board. That's why we didn't go back and redo this. Jackson Powers Johnson adding some nice presence to the interior there for Seattle. You want to continue to be aggressive in the middle in terms of your run game, and then, of course, your passing game moving forward. I think Powers Johnson's going to be a great addition for whoever gets him. Obviously, a lot of picks here that a lot of people probably won't agree with, Nick, especially with Daniels falling. I just don't think you're going to see 4 quarterbacks in the top 5. It's just not going to work out like that. One of them's going to slip, and I think it's going to be Daniels.
I think Daniels has the most potential to slip based off the system that he played at LSU and previous stops as well in college football. I think, he has the biggest potential to bust out of these 4 quarterbacks. Yes, he won the Heisman, but again, the system is really favorable down there in Baton Rouge, so I think this could be a tough gamble here. I do think the Broncos are not going to trade up for quarterback. I think they will try and stay at 12. I think George Patton and Sean Payton over there at the Mile High Field, they're going to kind of play their cards, sit back, relax. I don't think there's any reason to trade the whole farm here to try and make a move and get a quarterback early on. I think if you can get Daniels at 12, you should take him at that position. I think that makes a lot of sense for me. Brock Bowers to the Chargers, that pick just continues to make sense to us regardless if it was at 5 or 11. Bowers is an absolute freak of a talent. I totally agree with you that he's the most raw, talented, and purely incredible player I've seen in college at tight end position. Just such an incredible athlete, top to bottom. I think, Kenyon Mitchell, if he doesn't go to the Colts, whoever gets him is going to get an absolutely talented steal out of Toledo. He is flying up draft boards. I was really impressed with him in the film I watched during the tail end of the regular season, and now he's kind of flying up in this draft process. A very talented corner. The Colts may go elsewhere there, right? They could potentially go wide receiver. That's a need that they need, or, another move outside of a cornerback here, potentially with the moves they've made already this offseason. Cooper DeJean, another incredibly talented player out of Iowa at 14 at the Saints. The Saints are an interesting team. You really don't know what you're going to get with them. I feel like they're, in line for a gamble, but DeJean is a safe pick right now.
Looking at pick 17 through 26, the Jaguars, a couple of different needs for them. Jared Versto coming off the edge allows you to put Trayvon Walker on the inside. And this is just an animal of a player, big-time fan of Verse and his ability to get around the edge. Troy Fatanu, from Washington, a versatile lineman that's certainly going to continue to help out Joe Burrow. Terrion Arnold, I think the Rams are going to be a lock for a corner. Secondary really struggled last year. Arnold, the guy who's, probably one of the more polished corners, the most polished in this class of his abilities in man. Obviously a very physical player as well. Brian Thomas, the Steelers, they need to continue to beef up their receiving core, especially Deontay Johnson being traded. Guy who ran, a 4.3 40. He's a big-time playmaker, especially in his yards after catch ability. The Dolphins, they don't really have too many different needs. Picking at 21 here, Graham Barton, though, a guy you can put at guard after they just lost Robert Hunt. I think that might be optimal for them. Dallas Turner going to the Eagles. Hassan Reddick's yet to be traded, but seems like he'll be moving on at some point. This is a guy who certainly needs to improve as a run defender, but in terms of just being a raw pass rusher, this is a guy who is one of the best in the class at doing that. Nate Wiggins, a guy who I would be shocked to see slip to 23, especially with a lot of these teams we jumped over needing cornerbacks. Wiggins, though, is a smaller framed guy who has a lot of speed. And the Chargers, again, they'd be very happy to see him fall. Peyton Wilson, the Cowboys, seems to be the most perfect fit on our board, Nick, a guy they need. They just had Leighton Vander Esch retire. They need the bookend leader in the middle for them, and Wilson. This is a great player to do so, very disciplined, hard-working athlete from NC State. Tyler Nubbin, after losing Darnell Savage, trying to fill in the role there at safety. They did Xavier McKinney, but Nubbin, he's just such a good football player. And Liatu Watu, the Buccaneers have all kinds of needs. I think the UCLA Bruin He's a guy who's very physical off the edge. He was, one of the highest rated players in college football over the last 2 years. I think that'd be a great addition for them. Again, Nick, these 10 selections, a lot that people will probably disagree with, but I think everyone would be a little bit happy here if they were able to end up with these selections.
The Jaguars can grab Jared Verse and move Trayvon Walker into the middle. I think it makes a lot of sense as the former first overall pick has struggled, really hasn't hit the heights that you'd hope out of him. Move him on the inside. I think that would certainly benefit his career. Verse, a proven pass rusher out of Florida State, big physical player, similar to other strong pass rushers that have come out of the Seminole Florida State program in the past couple of years. Really impressive with him. I think Terrion Arnold, the Rams picking in the first round for the first time in a while. Kind of funny seeing their name on the board here at 19. I think they can add a great corner in Terrion Arnold. Part of that 1-2 punch with Kool-Aid McKinstry at Alabama this past season. One of the best secondaries in the country. A very, very talented player who's good, physically strong, keeps an eye on the ball, and also has good hands for him there. Graham Barton to the Dolphins makes sense for me. This is a team that doesn't have an incredible amount of needs, which is kind of interesting to say considering they haven't really hit the heights that we've expected out of the Dolphins, but they are a team that seems pretty stable where they are. You bring in a solid tackle here in Barton, who looked really good on the film at Duke. You plug him in, move him around. I think that adds some flexibility for that team. Dallas Turner could be a nice gamble for the Eagles, another team that seems to be very complete, but their defense had a lot of struggles the second part of the season. You bring in a guy in Turner there that's going to get after the quarterback, going to put pressure, going to be really solid in the backfield, has to work on his run defense, but I think he certainly has the tools to do that. Peyton Wilson at the Cowboys makes a lot of sense. Jerry Jones, he's gotten some of his picks right the last couple of years. He still has that touch. I think if he grabs Wilson here at 24, that'd be a fantastic pick.
No, yeah, 27, Kool-Aid McKinstry, guy was kind of slipping due to a foot injury. Should be good to go for the start of the season, though. Nice fluid athlete, really good against the run, nice press man corner. Braden Fiske, a guy who really tested well in Indianapolis to Buffalo, just seems to fit the mold, a guy who's going to go out there and play in 20-degree weather, and he's going to be fired up. So I think that's going to be a great addition for them. Just Rackstraw, the Lions, they still need some help at cornerback. Cam Sutton was awful, and he just got cut for off-the-field issues, so I think that's certainly going to help plug a need for them, even though they just did trade for Carlton Davis as well. A.D. Mitchell, one of those bigger-bodied guys who's a good route runner in one-on-one coverage. Some nice hands that he improved on. This is a guy who burned Kool-Aid and Terrion Arnold in the Alabama game. Some good film on Mitchell. I think that'd be great for the Ravens, finally adding some size to the receiving room. The 49ers adding J.C. Latham, a bit of a tackle they can continue to work with. And Xavier Worthy, this is obviously a popular pick. Signing Marquise Brown really gives them that speed we expected them to add. So maybe they won't do this. And again, we did make this right before L'Jarius Sneed got traded. So I think corner's probably going to be the optimal need for them now. But I think Worthy, if he's there, why not add the speed for him and Mahomes? Can't go wrong there either.
I think, adding a corner for the Chiefs does make sense, but before that trade was made, it felt like wide receiver had to be the move. It's incredible the Chiefs were able to win a Super Bowl considering their wide receiving woes were so bad with who they were trotting out, really struggled. Worthy would be a home run pick if they do decide to go with a wide receiver, then they can always add depth. Mahomes is as talented as he is. He's the best quarterback that we've seen in a very long time, probably since Tom Brady. He's such a talented player, but if he has no one to throw to, that's going to be an issue, obviously. If you could bring in a talented guy like Worthy, who is really untapped potential, nice speed, good physical frame, that's a great add, in my opinion. Ernest Rackstraw to the Lions. I love this pick. The Lions, with Sutton now being released due to his off-the-field issues, you have a need there that you can fill. I think the secondary was a bit shaky at times. The Lions, very much trending up, obviously, after making the NFC Championship game this past season, but their secondary could use some help. You plug in a guy like Rackstraw, who I think the film is fantastic at Missouri, a nice physical player, good ball skills, certainly a solid add there. Fiske to the Bills, a team that really hasn't attacked the issue of the defensive line at times. We saw them have some defensive issues after some of their players got hurt. Matt Milano got hurt at linebacker. I know it's a different position, but adding Fiske as depth for the defense, I think makes a lot of sense in upstate New York.
Yeah, they had a lot of injuries last year, especially on the D-line for the Bills. Looking at the start of round 2, the Panthers adding a nice route runner, great in short area, Ladd McConkey. I think the Patriots taking a quarterback in round 2 instead of round 1. I think, going ahead and taking that pass catcher in Marvin Harrison and waiting it out and hoping one will be there for you. That's got to be the move for New England. That would be the right thing to do. A player who plays the game the right way, doesn't turn the ball over, high character individual. And, Zach Frazier, a guy who, had an injury for West Virginia last year. He's now starting to skyrocket up boards after missing the back half of the year. Very impressive strength. He anchors very well. I think this would be a nice pick for the Cardinals. Washington adding Tyler Guyton. The Chargers continuing to address that pass catching room. The Giants traded this pick to the Panthers. This is, that was for the Brian Burns deal. They go ahead and get his replacement in Braswell, sandwiched in between 2 Penn State edge rushers. I think Chop Robinson might find his way into the first round. Really stands out here in this, first 7 selections of the second round.
I think Chop Robinson will find a way to kind of rise up draft boards. I think he's being criminally underrated at this point in time. If the Titans can get him at 38, that's an incredible value pick. Robinson's just a dynamic player off the edge. Very fast, good hands, nice feet movement as well. A top player, in my opinion. I love Zach Frazier. I know the injury concerns certainly are an issue after he missed half of the last year at West Virginia. But prior to that, he looked good. I looked at some of the film against Penn State. He looked pretty solid on film. A nice center who I think is a really good player that you can plug in. The Cardinals, they really are building together a great team. They have a ton of draft capital here. They're making a lot of different moves and grabbing a strong center that they could potentially rotate in the future. I think is a great move there. Bo Nix, the Patriots. You have Bo Nix and Bailey Zappi. I think those are two quarterbacks you could work with and kind of start to figure something out. Nix has a lot of experience in college, playing at Auburn, playing at Oregon. He certainly is a solid player, good arm, good field vision, a nice natural-born leader, speaks of grace, in the locker room, a good leader to add there. I like Bo Nix there at 34. I think that makes a lot of sense in the early second round. Chris Braswell to the Panthers and Ladd McConkey to the Panthers. The Panthers have a lot of needs. Obviously, they were the worst team in football last year, a complete disaster right now, no first-round pick, but they have two early second-round picks, one courtesy of the Giants. You bring in Braswell, add that nice speed and edge presence that they're going to have to replace by sending Burns up to New York. And Ladd McConkey, a good route runner, a guy who's a veteran, has some experience as well, a hard-working, good work ethic player, a nice player for Bryce Young to throw to.
41 through 54, Keon Coleman, the Texans joining the party, a guy who didn't really test well in terms of games or in terms of speed in his 40, but game speed's clearly there. And this is a guy who's got good route running skills, nice contested catch abilities as well. I think that'll be a nice pick for the Texans. TJ Tampa going to Atlanta, a zone corner for Raheem Morris. Michael Penix comes off the board at 44, and obviously the Raiders are pretty fine. They're pretty happy with the quarterback battle I think they're going to have for this year. But looking forward, Penix has got to be the guy for them. You continue to hover over this. Kamari Lassiter going to the Giants, addressing another need there at corner. 3 Michigan players coming off the board. Roman Wilson, a guy who's always available at the sticks with his nice route running for the Jaguars. Probably won't play outside for them as much as he will in the slot. This is certainly a player you want, especially with his aggressiveness as a blocker. And at the bottom here, Mike Sanders, still a versatile defensive back to help out what was a poor secondary for the Eagles. And then Chris Jenkins, a physical, run stopper for the Browns. And of course, the Eagles pick a couple slots above that. And Edgar and Cooper. Who really stands out in this section for you?
I like Edgar and Cooper a lot to the Eagles there. The Eagles, their defense completely fell apart after a strong start to the season. They had just massive defensive woes. And that game against the Buccaneers in the playoffs, just missed tackle after missed tackle, ended up costing them their season. You're bringing a guy like Cooper and Sanistro, 2 players there, solid defensive adds. I think Cooper at linebacker slots in perfectly day one, a nice physical player, good quarterback of the defense, a nice leader there. I like that pick a lot. I'm going to highlight a pick you didn't shout the name out of the guy, Javion Sanders, the tight end out of Texas to the Bengals. The Bengals certainly need tight end help. They always seem to need offensive line help, and now they need tight end help. Here you get a great tight end at 49, a guy from Texas, a nice player. I like what he can do. I think he's a really solid add. Kamari Lassiter to the Giants, they need to replace some secondary help. Xavier McKinney walked, ended up in Green Bay. You got to replace some other pieces on the secondary for the Giants. Lassiter, a good player at Georgia, part of the Kirby Smart defensive tree, a talented player, really good eyes on the field, really solid, high football IQ. I think that'd be a great add for the Giants.
Yeah, Sanders, a good yak tight end. Looking at 55 through 64 to round out round 2. T'Vondre Sweat, what a pick this would be for the Dolphins. They lose Christian Wilkins, they implant a guy who had a great combine, physical run stopper for them. I think Jaden Hicks, his versatility for the Cowboys seems like a Dallas-type selection. Marshawn Nealon's really rose up the board. Was, giving the Packers another edge defender. The Texans, I think they would be very happy to have Darius Robinson in there. They did a lot of work on that side of the ball this offseason. Ricky Pearsall sliding to 60 seems pretty unlikely, but again, this is the draft. It's going to happen, so I think that's going to be a great player for the Bills, an athletic player who you can move around a good bit, and he's great downfield at catching the ball. 61 for the Lions. Christian Haynes, a good physical guard they can plug in there. I thought they had the best offensive line in football last year, but they do have some miles on them. So if they're going to continue to be physical, you're going to need a player like that. Braylon Trice with his motor just seems like a Baltimore Raven. I think this is a nice group of selections here. Pearsall falling, that was a little bit questionable.
I think Pearsall, certainly has the opportunity to rise. Pearsall falling, it could happen here. The Bills would be very happy to get him at 60. Pearsall, I think, fits a lot of the needs the Bills have. I think he could be a really good player to get them where they want to go. The Bills, they have a very solid offense, but they seem to stutter at points and had some issues on the offensive side of the ball. Pearsall would be a great add. I think Marshawn Nealon is a fantastic player. I love the way he's rising from Western Michigan. The film on him is solid, looked good as well across the board, in the pre-draft testing phase. I think he would be a great player for them to add. Darius Robinson at 59 to the Texans, a team team that is very solid, heading the right direction. The Texans, they seem to turn around their fortunes overnight with D'Amico Ryans at the helm. Now they add in a great player in Robinson, who's underrated coming off the edge, part of this great edge rushing crash. Christian Haynes, I like him a lot at UConn. Good film on him at guard. Very versatile. You can move him around, really get a whole lot out of him. Nice player. Devontae Sweat would be a great pick for the Dolphins. Such a really strong physical player. Just an absolute menace against the pass and really solid against the run as well. A great physical player coming out of Texas. That'd be a great pick for the Dolphins.
Looking at round 3, Xavier Legette going back-to-back receivers for the Panthers to start these last 2 rounds. Legette, the last time he was in Bank of America Stadium, put on an absolute clinic against UNC. This guy has great leaping ability, strong hands, nice focus. Christian Mahogany to Arizona to continue beefing up that interior. And then you open things up a little bit, looking at 68 to 81. A lot of very solid football players here. New England adding another pass catcher in Jalen McMillan, I think would be great for them. The most obvious fit here, Blake Corum from Michigan, reuniting with Harbaugh there at 69. Doesn't seem to be much of an overdraft there either. I think that's going to be a perfect pick for them. Arizona once again with Jalen Polk. I think the Cardinals have an opportunity to really do some damage in this year's draft with the selections they have. A bit of a run of defensive linemen. The Lions picking up Gabriel Murphy. I think another D lineman who's got some versatility in Brandon Dorless. For the Falcons, Malachi Corley. The Broncos opting to go without Jerry Jeudy. They sent him to Cleveland, picking up a guy here who can sit in the slot and make some plays of his twitchiness. Junior Colson just seems like he'd fit great in Antonio Pierce's defense there. A nice physical, disciplined linebacker. Johnny Wilson kind of slips down the board a little bit, but this is a guy who's proven he has hands. I don't think he needs to switch to tight end one bit. This is a guy who's got a lot of size, and people like to keep him in line, but I think he's a pretty pristine route runner on the outside. And Jeremiah Trotter, such a good linebacker for Clemson, falling down the board a little bit, hoping he can replace what Bobby Wagner gave them for so many years. Another section of the draft, Nick, where there's some really good players. I think people would certainly be happy. Not everyone's going to be a hit, but I can already pencil in a few that will.
A lot of guys I like here. I think Mahogany going to the Cardinals, a team that's completely changing their fortunes. I've said that earlier in the episodes with Polk and Mahogany here in the 3rd round. This could be great moves for this team. Max Melton, the cornerback, going to Washington. I think that would be a great fit. The Rutgers cornerback, a really talented player. I like the film on him, underrated player. And then another corner they're grabbing, Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky, a player I also love. I think it's criminal that he's being rated this low. He's such a talented player, a really nice physical player, great football IQ, looked really good in that Kentucky system. Really solid player there. Dwayne Carter to the Bears out of Duke. Carter, underrated in my opinion, a big physical run stopper, clogs the middle, a really strong player. I'd love to see him at Chicago, which that defense is getting incredible. They were really solid the second half of the season. You plug in a guy like Carter who's really good against the run, that could work out great for them. Johnny Wilson, I liked him a lot at Florida State. He really showed a lot of potential here. You plug him in there with the Falcons with a really solid piece of weapons around him already. That could work out great. Jeremiah Trotter, I can't believe he's falling this far. He's really having a pre-draft tumble that is very tough for him to see. He is a talented player out of Clemson. He would work great at Seattle. I think he'd plug him in there immediately. He has impact early on. Jonah Ellis to the Giants, another player, defensive piece for the Giants to add some nice edge rushing presence. And then Blake Corum to the Chargers. Like you said, that makes a ton of sense, right? Reunites with his college coach Corum. We don't see a lot of talented running backs, coming out of this class. Running backs are not as valued a position in the NFL anymore, but you get Corum in the 3rd round here. I think he could be a really boom prospect for the Chargers.
Looking at 82 through 94, Patrick Paul to the Steelers. I think this is a player that might go earlier because he's a nice project at tackle, as a standout for the Cougars. DJ James to Houston. They continue to beef up that defensive back room, a guy who really stood out at the Senior Bowl. Jonathan Brooks, keeping him in state with the Cowboys, a guy who showed great abilities as a runner, but also a pass catcher before he went down with a torn ACL. I think the Cowboys are certainly going to be taking a running back in this draft at some point. I think this would be the nice a good opportunity to do that. And right after that, 2 picks later, Jalen Wright, showcasing a lot of speed to Tampa Bay. Not exactly a need for them, I wouldn't say. Rashad White did pretty well last season, but you can never have too many backs in this type of league. The Cardinals going with another center, Cedric Van Pran. That'd be nice if they got him and Frazier. Be interesting to see how that'd work out. Maybe it'd be a wasted pick, right? It's 3 interior linemen already for them. But they were so bad on the interior. Kyler Murray can really do damage, I think, if he has the right pieces in front of him. So I think bringing in some nice competition and the talent they would certainly, provide if they listen to us would be, I think, very impactful. Maris Leofau, guy, some nice sideline-to-sideline speed at linebacker after Devin White's release. Chris Abrams-Drain, a corner from Missouri to the Ravens. And I think Brandon Rice to San Francisco. This makes very much sense. And if you don't know why, well, you need to probably learn some football.
Certainly want to highlight two linebackers here. I think Maris Liufau and Tommy Eichenberg will be great picks. Eichenberg, a tackle machine in Ohio State, a quarterback of that defense, a leader in that 4-2-5 system, heads over to Cleveland, staying in Ohio State. A nice physical player, great player. I like him a lot. And you look at Lafayette, coming out of Notre Dame, a really talented player as well, replaces and fills a need. Brendan Rice to the Niners makes a lot of sense. That's an offense that is really solid. I think their quarterback play is fantastic with Brock Purdy. They have a nice amount of weapons around him, but you plug in a guy like Rice who looked good at times at USC, a talented, nice player, top to bottom. I know I said that the running back position is not as valuable in football today, and that still is true, but we have two more backs going with Brooks and Wright. I think Brooks to the Cowboys makes a lot of sense. Wright to the Bucks. I know it's not entirely a need, but I think it's a player that you kind of can grab and gamble out of Tennessee that can make a whole lot of sense there for the Buccaneers, who I think are in a good position, a solid roster. Chris Abrams, trainee, is a really good player coming out of Missouri. I think you plug him in there on the Ravens secondary, he can do damage immediately.
Looking at the final few selections in round 3, Cam Hart to Jacksonville, a guy who has had a great offseason. Cooper Beebe, look at the Steelers again, continuing to improve their offensive line. It's really been a struggle for them the last couple of years. Their run game's just been non-existent. He had a mean streaker there at 98 overall. And then the Rams, I know they just took Stetson Bennett, but Spencer Rattler is a more ideal player for them, I think, if you want to compare it to Matt Stafford, a big-armed player who always had tremendous upside. And that speaks volumes. Rattler as well, I think, if he can get the right development, Sean McVay could really make a ball player out of Spencer Rattler. I think 99 for him makes too much sense.
I think Rattler at 99 would be a really nice move for the Rams. They got to look at the future, right? Stafford cannot be the long-term solution. He's getting up there in age. He was first drafted in 2009. That feels like a lifetime ago. Rattler, a guy that really didn't work out in college at both his stops, but he flashed that potential at Oklahoma and at South Carolina at times. He does have a lot of untapped potential. Cooper Beebe, so underrated at 98. That's incredible that he falls that far. Such a talented player coming out of Kansas State. Looks really good in the film, top to bottom. Cam Hart, a lot of potential to boom in Jacksonville. A great player at Notre Dame, a really solid player. McKinley Jackson as well on the interior defensive line at Cincinnati. He would be a solid add. Jackson, underrated player in my opinion, who has a lot of potential to really kind of hit the ground running. Kalen Bullock as well, another secondary piece add for the Commanders, who are trying to bulk that secondary up and overturn what was one of the worst defenses in football overnight.
Going to round out our 3-round mock draft. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. Not much confidence in this mock draft, to be quite frankly honest with you. I think a lot of these picks would be really good, and I think some of them, for the most part, will end up happening in these later rounds. This is just an interesting cycle, Nick. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest with you. But these are always exciting to do. Always try to see everyone else's different perspectives, and this is certainly the one that we provide that we certainly think holds some merit.
Certainly a very interesting cycle right now. It seems like you really never know what's going to happen. It seems like every single day new stories are coming out about different moves that could be happening this season that will shake things up. I do like the way this mock looks, but I think there's going to be a lot of picks that change. There's going to be a lot of trades that we're obviously not going to mock, but trades that are going to be happening, and a lot of things that are going to shuffle around. It's very interesting to follow this cycle because this cycle is very random. It feels like a lot of teams are going to take a lot of gambles. We're going to see how it pays off.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
That was a fun little 45-minute mock.